Welcome back to Lusail International Circuit, where it's Sunday already. Isn't that fun, Johnny?
It's not only Sunday, it's December.
Yeah, it is December, so the countdown to Christmas has begun. Christmas has come early for George Russell in the form of a one-place grid promotion thanks to a one-place grid penalty for Max Verstappen. If you thought the excitement was over after the sprint race, you were wrong. You had a long 20-year interregnum before the qualifying for the Grand Prix itself happened, and then another 20 years to wait for the investigation into the alleged impeding incident where Max was investigated for driving too slowly. The world champion driving too slowly. So shall we dig in, Johnny, into the reasons for the penalty? Because it should have been 3 places. It was mitigated down to 1, I think.
Yeah, it's quite an unprecedented thing. I messaged someone from the team to say, 1 place penalty, question mark, and they went, yeah, we've never heard of this before. So it's a slightly weird one. Normally impedance on the quick lap, and you impede, you kind of prevent them doing the lap, 3-place penalty, you're back. But this was actually on kind of out laps, but it was quite a confusing session because Max was doing double prep laps and there's been cool-off laps, so all these processes were important. So it happened at that 12, 13, 14 complex. George came up very quick, held up, had to avoid Max, dropped a wheel into the dirt. So you can argue there was potentially a consequence because you're getting towards the end of the lap, bit of dirt and gravel and whatever on the tyres, not fantastic. So Stuart looked into it, said, yep, normally 3 places for something like this, but they decided that, a combination of that, plus the fact George had seen Max was aware, George there and tried to kind of get out of the way, but it didn't happen, makes it 1-place grid penalty. But I think Max is going to be furious. I mean, he had a session with our Dutch colleague earlier on tonight, and so I just don't understand what this is. I mean, if that's even me just going to the stewards is a penalty, next time I'll just pretend to crash into everybody and make sure everyone else gets penalised.
Typically bolshy response from Max, but Alex and I were watching practice from that section, and it's such a weird part of the circuit. It's kind of like a scaled down version of Turn 8 at Turkey, obviously going the other way, and you go right. There is good visibility, which is one of the reasons that the stewards kind of took a plague on both your houses approach, wasn't it? Because they said Max was looking in his mirrors and could see, George had good visibility. But firstly, you get there and there's such a low barrier, you sort of think, should we be here? We actually checked the FIA map to make sure it wasn't a red zone, because when there's a barrier there and no fence, you think, I probably shouldn't be standing here. But it was on the inside. But the difference between a car on a hot lap and one on not hot lap is massive through there. And if a fast car encounters a slow car, there's not much room for manoeuvre. As we saw with George, it was kind of like onto the dirt. So it was quite dangerous. You can't have,
I mean, fine, it is an out lap, it is a prep lap. You can argue it did or did it not have a problem. But equally, you can't block people on out laps anyway, because you don't know what people are doing, unpredictable behaviours. So it is something that you can't just let these things go and not look at, because otherwise you're going to end up in a scenario where does it become legit to block people on prep laps or out laps or something, especially when we've had all this hoo-ha about leaving gaps out the pits and minimum delta times and all that sort of thing. So there's a few little layers to it.
Haven't we seen lots of drivers hauled up for not obeying the delta this weekend? I suppose the other thing that plays into it, the stewards' findings said they're on different prep strategies, which is something we've seen across a lot of the teams this weekend, haven't we? Because this circuit doesn't have many hard acceleration areas. There's a problem with actually balancing the grip, getting the front and rear axle into the temperature. Kevin Magnussen in the pen said he was just booting the car in a straight line to get his tyres into the window, and that worked. And if it works for K-Mag, why not work for anyone else? So there you go.
I think that's the key to, Max's transformation. I mean, he called it a miracle from this morning. There's some great quotes saying, this car feels like a rally car. I should be with my dad in Belgium competing in it, because it's been that terrible. It's sideways all the time. And you saw at the start with not great through turn 1, and turn 2 is all over the place and sliding around. So it wasn't very hopeful for this afternoon. Christian Horner said they threw the kitchen sink at the setup. So I think they changed the mechanical platform, aero platform, ride heights and suspension settings. And the car seemed to come alive. The disconnection, where the front and rear axle aren't kind of talking to each other and doing what you're doing and transitioning for the corners, everything connected up was beautiful and a sensational pole position. You still can't take away the fact that lap was fantastic on a weekend when George Russell's been pretty mighty as well. But starting second here, it's not game over at all. We've got a race on our hands.
Christian Horner probably be throwing the kitchen sink at Sergio Perez as well at some point. But we'll come back to that later, because I've got next on my list Russell versus Hamilton. George has been doing the business in qualifying, Lewis less so. Last time out in Vegas, great race for Lewis, but he came out and said this extraordinary thing about "I'm not fast anymore," which of course you can't help but quote. It's not clickbait if he said it. Let's just get it out there. We did a nice feature on the web earlier yesterday, and last night, Lewis came out and said, "I've still got it." So where are we at with Lewis and this sort of strange innuendo almost that he hasn't got quite the same car? I think.
Yeah, I think the problem for Lewis is that he's in a team he's leaving at the end of this season, so it's a kind of different scenario to normal in a season where the car's been unpredictable at times, and it's been. You have afternoons like Vegas race, evenings like Vegas race where it's fantastic and he's performing and stunning drive from 10th to 2nd. Fast forward to the previous race, Brazil, complete disaster. Wasn't comfortable in qualifying, wasn't comfortable in the race. After the race says, if this is the last race I can perform, then this is all over. So you've got this kind of roller coaster of emotions from him as a driver who has self-doubt. When he won at Silverstone, for example, he's talking about, doubt if I'd ever win again in Formula One. So someone who's, questions himself. And I think that's where the comments came from last night, that, questioning himself. And he's not fast now. There's no hiding the fact that he was slower today, 4 tenths off just over 4 tenths compared to 0.399 last night. So contextually, factually, yes, he is slower. Contextually, factually, he's not fast anymore because there is this gap. But the flashes of speed are there. And I think deep down is the belief in him that speed can get unlocked in the right circumstance, in the right environment, and maybe just needs a change of atmosphere, change of team, the move to Ferrari, maybe will reignite what he still feels is within him.
Speaking of a change of atmosphere, the McLaren, they're all smiles at McLaren today, aren't they? Despite a little bit of tetchiness on that final lap of the sprint race where the team was saying, "Lando, don't do it. Don't do the swap." And Lando said, "Well, I want to do the swap. I want to give him this present." And then I just found it slightly extraordinary in the press conference that, firstly, Oscar didn't look particularly chuffed at being gifted the victory. And then Lando sort of said, "Well, I don't view these things as a win anyway, because it's not a proper Grand Prix."
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Ironically, on a year where their execution of races has been kind of under the spotlight, they've faced criticisms and people saying they should have done things differently in Hungary, should have done things differently in Italy. Today, with the Drivers' Championship gone, it was executed perfectly. The pair of them working together, Lando giving Oscar the DRS to stave off George Russell, timing the kind of backing off brilliantly so he didn't actually lose 2 places, because that was the big danger the team was concerned about. And Lando obviously felt he needed to give it back. But I wonder if how much of that was also to make sure the slate was clean going into next year, because they're building for a championship. They're on this push towards the championship. They could win the constructors this year. They didn't get the drivers. Next year, they've got to be aiming for both. And I think maybe Lando's sense is that get this out of the way now, start next year, he's giving away nothing.
Right. Well, let's get through this next bbit quickly, because if we go over 10 minutes, our producer will go nuts. So yes, Sergio Perez, kitchen sink, pit lane exit. He and Franco Colapinto starting from pit lane for the sprint race. You have the in-car camera from Perez, the light goes green, and oh, hang on a minute, he's still ordering from Papa John's on his phone or something. There was a peculiar explanation from the team, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's one of the more baffling things. But I think there's sometimes this disconnect between a driver's told something and then a driver takes it absolutely literally. So potentially, I'm sure Red Bull said to him, you aren't going to charge from a pit lane start to be in the points. So we'll treat it as a test session. Just don't get involved in dirty air and mess around where you can use a test session. And maybe Sergio somehow thought, oh, well, they want a gap, so I'll leave a gap. But I think leaving almost half a lap rather than a couple of seconds wasn't quite in the game plan. I'm sure Colapinto couldn't understand what was going on. So yeah, baffling scenario. You spoke to him again tonight and he doubled down, didn't he?
Yeah. We wanted a big gap, he said, to be in clear air for most of the race. We'll leave you with that. Thank you. We'll be back tomorrow, later today. No, actually, it will be tomorrow. Enjoy.